Hi, and welcome back to the PT-11 build. It's early November, and I've got all the panels ready. They've all been glassed and prepared as directed, and now I've got the first two bulkheads wired up to the bottom. Drilled some little holes, all in accordance with the directions. Put in these little wires, twisted them up to hold these things in place. There's two on that one right now, one on this masthead bulkhead underneath there. Camera doesn't really go down there. And I've got the first two hull panels laid out, and wiring those up is next. So with the first two bulkheads in place, I started wiring the first hull panels into place, starting right near the bulkhead. I started that hole right there and wired it in. There's the wire out the bottom side. And I did one just after the bulkhead as well. Excuse me. That holds it. I did that on both sides, and also added these wires loosely up at the masthead bulkhead. That holds the panels roughly in shape, but they'll get pulled in tighter later as I keep wiring the bottom. Then I used a rope and pulled the two stern ends together so that I could pull the bottoms of these panels into place, because they were spread out quite a bit. And I pulled them into place, and then I could do these two wires right here to hold those panels. And now the process is to wire this completely. I'm going to do every other hole, alternating sides. Do like two on one side and go and do the same two on the other. And then when it's all wired, I'll go back and fill in every other one that I didn't do. So that's where it stands. Just the beginning of the wiring process. I've got I've got 4 sets on each side now, 4 wires, not including the ones holding the bulkheads. So now I've finished wiring the first set of hull panels onto the bulkheads and the bottom. It wasn't too bad. I was a little worried about the bow here, where they have to be forced in pretty tightly, but it actually went really well. No real problems with it. It's all wired, every hole through the bottom, every 7 inches, except for where the green tape is. That's where it's lightly nailed to these 2x4s underneath, so that I can slide this thing around. But it's looking pretty good, starting to look kind of boatish, boaty, something. Pretty happy with it so far. The twisting the wires has taken a little bit of a learning curve, but I've learned how to do that correctly now so that I don't break them. It's important to pull tightly with the vice grips against the wires while twisting them so that you pull the joint tight as well as twisting the wires tightly. Just twisting the wires won't pull it tight enough without breaking. So that's where we are after one set of hull panels. Next I installed the aft seat bulkhead. That's this first one here with the 2 edges glassed. It fits in slots in the panel below, and had a couple places to wire it. And I added another wire in there closer to the center line because there was a little gap. I did that on both sides. And then the transom, which has a curve in it thanks to this former that's screwed to it temporarily. And the transom's wired so that it's flush at the aft edge of the bottom panels. And I just used the pre-drilled holes in the hull panels, matched the holes in the transom, and wired it up tightly. And those are the last 2 pieces to go in before the number 2 panels, which are right here alongside, ready to go. That's the next step. Hull panels 2 are now fully wired up and installed. Dry, of course. I started at the middle, worked my way out from the main bulkhead, wiring it to the top of the first panel. Then I wired up the stem area, wiring it first to the top of the panel, and then pulling the stem together up here at the stem, obviously. Came out pretty well. Inside it's all wired up along every 7¼ inches along the seam. I added a few wires here and there to secure the bulkheads a little more to the panels, make sure that the seams are tight. Everything is still aligned on center and with these alignment marks on the panels. It's starting to look like a boat. So far it's fitting together well. Transom's in place, all wired up to the sides and the bottom. Again, I added a couple extra wires on the transom and also on this bulkhead down at the corner there. It just pulls the panel in tighter. This side has a gap because of the angle. Back side's tight. Everything's aligned. It's looking pretty good. Next up is the top panel, the final panels, one on each side. Now all the hull panels are installed and wired up. Everything's tight. The next step is going to be the gunnels. They'll go on next. A few steps to prepare for that. But this all looks pretty good. Looks like a boat now. Pretty happy with the visual symmetry. I don't see any issues. There's a couple steps coming up where I'm going to double check everything and maybe tighten a few seams, that kind of thing. But I think it all went together really well. It seems to be the way it should be. No funny looking shapes. So I think it's symmetrical and properly aligned and all of that. Stem. Quick look inside. The seams are tight on the inside for the most part, and then a little bit open on the outside, and that's not only the nature of these seams, but it's also by design because they get filled with epoxy from the outside. But yeah, I think it looks pretty good. Next step, gunnels.